CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
Hey, it's your boy Pharrell. I'm a huge fan of Tim Graham and Friends. Then again, who isn't? Shake it, ooh.
It's Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. And momentarily, we're going to be joined by Buffalo State men's basketball coach, assistant coach, Nick MacDonald, who is going to give us his thoughts not only on the NCAA bracket with some upsets and some insights and analysis, but also we're going to take a look at the local college basketball scene, emphasis on the Big Four and what's been going on there. It's been pretty slow with the Bills and the Sabres. Yes, some things here or there. Matt Milano, contract restructuring. He will be reportedly a free agent after this season, takes a big pay cut that helps the Bills out with their salary cap situation. And given the fact that it's hard for him to stay on the field, that was one of those deals that I think went to, hey, if you want to stick around here, you're going to have to take a pay cut. Otherwise, we're going to have to let you go because we can't justify spending this kind of money on a guy who misses 4 or 5 games a year, regardless of how skilled he is. The Buffalo Sabres have the worst owner in hockey, according to their fans, and that is a poll by The Athletic. The Athletic posted this story earlier this week, and of the 32 owners, based on fan response, Terry Pegula finished clear-cut 32nd, and according to the story written by my employer, The Athletic, the Sabres had the most votes in the poll, or Sabres fans had the most votes in the poll than every franchise except the Minnesota Wild. So it was a healthy portion. It was not a small sample size. And of that group, 61% of the fans said that their confidence in ownership was lower than a year ago, even when Terry Pegula also finished dead last. Jonah, I mean, I know that we can't really say the other 31 owners, really, is this true or is it not? But it is a metric, just at least based on fan response. No surprise that Terry Pegula finishes dead last in this poll, given where the Sabres are in terms of their success or lack thereof. But when you see it in a chart like this, it brings it to life a little bit. It has some gravitas, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's much surprise. I think we know that the Sabres fan base is very down on ownership and that the blame wheel that spins around year to year, sometimes it's the GM, sometimes it's the coach, sometimes it's some of the better players, and it seems to be falling on ownership at this point in time. Sometimes it's been, different owners. It's been Tim Pegula was the one to blame years ago, and now it's, Terry's the problem and the one that needs to step aside or hire somebody else to make some decisions. So I don't think it's surprising. I think they're the only team that got an F grade. I think the number, the average grade, the curve, where the Sabres fall on that is a little bit alarming, and how much Sabres fans' dissatisfaction with ownership is different than the rest of the league and things like that. But I think it would be more illustrative if it was a poll of players and or other executives around the league, if this was how the league and the NHL community felt about ownership, because I do think that maybe there's a different perception from the players and people that work for the ownership that, some of these players have gotten some pretty big contract extensions. Terry Pegula, when he took over the team, came in and almost had it like a Mark Cuban vibe that he was going to be, the owner that everybody wanted to work for. And that's not really the case anymore, but I wonder if that's fallen to bottom of the league levels, because that's really, I think, where you evaluate ownership is
Well,
that
it hasn't
do
been that
people
way
want
for
to
a
work
long
for them?
time, Joan. I did the story on PSE falling apart right before COVID. So that was what we just had the 5-year anniversary. And I did the whole thing about the toxicity at PSE, with most of that dealing with non-Bills properties within the PSE umbrella, which would be most notably the Sabres, but also the Amerks and the Bandits and the music label and the different restaurants and all that stuff that they don't even own anymore. 716, all the different food and beverage things. So that was 5 years ago that I was hearing from people, and I've quoted them in the story, who were saying they don't like working for PSE / the Sabres, and that it used to be a dream job that they would puff out their chest when they told people where they worked, when people would run into them or they'd get caught up with their old friends. Hey, what are you up to nowadays? Well, I work for the Sabres. Wow, that's cool. And then it became, hey, man, how do I get a job at the Sabres? And them saying, you don't want to come work for the Sabres. You stay away from here. I'm trying to get out, type vibe. So yeah, that's been a long time. That's a stench in the fabric of the Sabres organization.
Yeah. I mean, and I think another big takeaway is that, if I'm not mistaken, I think ownership got a good grade from the NFLPA survey. Other than the plane, there were some complaints about that. But it seems like the Bills players like the ownership, and we don't need to tell Buffalo fans this, but it's the same owner of those two teams. And that tells that, Terry Pegula either needs to put more time and attention into the hockey franchise that he purchased as the savior and was going to lead them to a Stanley Cup because he was such a Sabres fan coming into it, or consider selling the team to somebody that is only a hockey owner and can put all of their time and energy into saving and fixing this hockey franchise, because perhaps Terry Pegula's resources and attention are spread too thin with owning these two clubs. And, the Sabres need an owner who is 100% focused on the hockey franchise.
Well, we've talked about it on this podcast before, and I've even written about it, is that the structures of these teams are totally different, in which Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott each report to Terry Pegula individually. One doesn't report to the other. And Terry Pegula long has held a management structure with the hockey team of the general manager reports to Terry and the head coach reports to the general manager. And I think that Terry Pegula is way more involved with the hockey team than he is with the Bills, because it is Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane's organization. And I think even if you wanted to pick one over the other, I think it's Sean McDermott's culture that has been applied and is maintained within the entire facility, from top down. And I think that Terry Pegula lets those guys run the organization himself. I think he's hands off with the Bills. So, kind of counter to your point, I think maybe he needs to find a way to get it that way with the Sabres, to where he has a culture set forth by and maybe thinks he's striving or making strides that way with Lindy Ruff and Kevin Adams together, as opposed to Kevin Adams with Don Granato, a coach that neither of them had really any NHL experience when they took over those jobs for the Sabres in those roles. That maybe Lindy Ruff has more of an influence on culture because of his long experience. He's the winningest coach to not have won a Stanley Cup. He's Sabres legend, all those things. But I think that Terry Pegula, it's to compare the Bills and the Sabres, about the only thing that is in common is that his name's on the masthead as the owner, because each team is run wildly different than the other. Anything else we want to get to, or do we want to just welcome Nick MacDonald onto the podcast to talk hoops?
Yeah, I mean, it's March Madness. It's Wednesday night, and the tournament starts on Thursday, or has already started with the playing games. We're going to talk with Nick about St. Bonaventure and their NIT loss. UB women are going to have an NIT home game this weekend, either Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. That date hasn't been finalized yet, and everybody else is done playing. But there's a lot of March Madness, NCAA tournament bracket teams. Actually, I want to mention an event going on Thursday night, starting at 5 o'clock at Sports City Pizza Pub, Coaches vs. Cancer fundraiser awareness event. I'll be participating in, even though I'm not a coach, but I'm involved with the Men Wear Pink campaign and involved with local basketball, and I'll be behind the bar pouring some draft beers from 6 to 7, and there'll be some local coaches, Mike MacDonald, George Helkovich, maybe some others there. Some WGR radio personalities and some other local sports personalities. So that can be a fun place to come out and watch some of the NCAA games and hang out with some local basketball coaches on Thursday night.
Yeah, I think I'm going to head out to that. I have some time on my schedule. I think I'll be able to make it. I also want to ask folks, if you are listening right now or watching on YouTube, to please hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, rate it, like it, do all the different things, whatever's available on the platform that you're using to tie yourselves to Tim Graham and Friends, and let us know that you're out there. You will get the alerts when a new episode drops, all that good stuff. And please get engaged. We love seeing the comments, and we interact with them when they're posted. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Nick MacDonald from Buff State to talk about college hoops.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.
Welcome back to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. As promised, it is Buffalo State assistant basketball coach Nick MacDonald. I always feel when I talk to a MacDonald, like David Letterman always used to, when he had Norm MacDonald on, always used to emphasize MacDonald. It was kind of like his thing because of the way it's spelled, I guess. And I always just want to talk about the MacDonalds because of Letterman. But sorry, Nick. Sorry for that little diversion. But welcome to the show.
Thanks. Appreciate you guys having me back on. I mean, so nice we had to do it twice, huh? I guess that must have been that much of a hit last year when we did this. So I'm very, very honored to get the invite back.
I will say this, though, Nick. It did well. I mean, it did good numbers because we're going to break down the bracket, and everybody wants as much insight as they can get for their upsets and to differentiate themselves. You don't want to go chalk throughout your bracket. You got no shot of winning. So You got to pick your spots, and you want as much insight as you can get. And you being a former player at Damon, at Niagara, the family that you come from, your brother working with the Brooklyn Nets, your other brother playing, every brother's played college basketball. But anyways, it also was the podcast where it got the most apathy. I got the most responses when I posted last year's podcast to people saying, no, thanks. Usually we don't get that, Nick. I don't think it was you. I think it was just college basketball. I did get a lot of people who just want Bills Sabres. That's it. So they were like, hard pass. So let's give them some Bills, though, Nick. You are a Bills fan. And we'll talk Sabres. I don't know what your thoughts are, but let's start with the Bills. What's your thoughts on this offseason so far? You like what you see as a fan?
I loved everything they did. I think the only thing maybe that you could kind of, point to and, use as like a flaw a little bit is the 2 defensive linemen that they signed that are going to be suspended for the first 6 games for PED violations. But I mean, other than that, I feel like they've addressed pretty much every need, right? I think they were able to get a receiver down the field with some speed with Josh Palmer, and they were able to get some pass rush guys. They really struggled to rush the pass in that AFC Championship game going against Mahomes. They didn't have anybody that get to the quarterback. He was very, very comfortable back there. So for them to get some guys that are able to, address that and to be older, more experienced, I think you could definitely tell they decided to go older up front, and they're kind of going to lean towards playing younger in the secondary with Benford, with Cole Bishop, stuff like that. But I'm very intrigued to see what they do. Part of me still thinks they might still have a trade or something cooking up their sleeves as we get here towards April before the draft. But we'll see where it goes. I've said this the past couple of years, I will always trust Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. They have fully earned my trust, whichever direction that they think is the right way to go. I kind of just smile and wave and just kind of appreciate the fact that they're the right men in charge, and they've done a great job. It's unfortunate how the past couple of years have ended, but look, nobody's been able to beat Mahomes in the AFC anyway. So it's I like the direction they're going, and hopefully they can keep it going.
The 2 6-game suspensions on the same day, to have that be announced while you're sitting down talking about your free agent signings, bit of an embarrassment.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things too. I feel like you never quite know the full story. You don't know what was going behind the scenes. I mean, I would have liked to hopefully say like, yeah, they knew that this was going to come down the pipe and that Joey Bosa was going to be here and he was going to be able to play and the other guys weren't. I mean, who really knows? If I was in those meetings, I wish I could hear what was going on and stuff like that. But look, they got my full trust, and I really do think Bosa has some gas left in the tank. I really do think so. So we'll see. Hopefully, they get the most out of that signing.
I think, signing 2 guys at virtually the same position, they're in that situation, and not knowing about one until it was too late is a little bit of a bad look for the Bills front office. But football-wise, I don't think it's going to be much of a disaster. I kind of think 6 games is only about a third of the season. They're players that are probably going to play a lot, but they're backups. They're not starters that they're going to need out there every down. And I think from the Bills' perspective, you have Dwayne Carter and you have Javon Solomon. I think they play a little more in those first 6 weeks. You see what you have in them. It might hurt these players a bit more than the Bills, and that they lose their opportunities that they could have from day one and don't get on the field quite as much because younger players have taken their opportunities. And then I think you look at it from the Bills fan perspective a little bit like signing Jordan Phillips, and it's escaping me who else they signed, but the midseason additions to fortify defensive line depth, they're now going to get that from these guys in week 7. So if there's an injury to a starter or there's a need for more on the defensive line, they have these players in reserve, and I don't think they're going to have a huge problem getting through those first 6 weeks without these 2 players on the defensive line.
It is a third of the season, though. 6 games is a third of the season, and you don't know what games are going to be within those 6 games. Are the Chiefs going to be one of those first few games, or different games that could determine tiebreakers, the division, to not have those guys? And, the practice situation, they count against the cap. When do you make that switch? They're not going to be getting great reps because you want the top reps to go to the guys who are starting on Sunday. Yeah, that's a tough spot. But Josh Allen is global. Josh Allen keeps getting more power. He's got a movie deal. He's got $250 million guaranteed. Nick, your thoughts on the Sabres? Before we switch over to basketball full time. But what do you want to say about go ahead, Jonah.
Well, I just want to make a quick note on Nick MacDonald and the Sabres. I saw him maybe half a dozen games last year, and I don't know if there were maybe more, because sometimes I went looking for him and he was off buying hats and I couldn't find him when he told me to meet him on the 300 level. But I don't think he's been to a game all year. So I want to know why Nick has kind of given up on the Sabres and checked out on them from really day one this season.
A lot to unpack right there. First off, I will never give up on the Sabres. I will always be optimistic about the Sabres going forward, no matter how dark and depressing it gets. Second off, I'm very glad Jonah brought that story up, because it's funny. Last year, I thought this story was going to come up. And maybe, Jonah, I should have wore that hat today. I'm wearing a pink golf hat right now, but I should have brought that hat. The story goes, Tim, is Jonah and I kind of always have this thing when we go to, the same games, whether it's a high school basketball game, a Sabres game, Bills game, we always, text each other like, oh, where you at? Like, let's meet up sometime in between. Or sometimes if we're at the Bills game, I'll give you a little wave to the press box or something like that. And we were in the 300 level, and I told Jonah, I said, come down to the concourse, the 300 level concourse, like in between the period. Kind of got like a little bit of a wishy-washy reply from Mr. Bronstein there. He was like, I think I can come down. I'm not quite sure. So I ended up just saying like, screw this. I was like, there was this hat that I walked by when I was walking into the atrium, and I saw the little Sabre store right by that escalator, and I was like, that hat is calling my name. So
Gotta have that
I
hat.
took the escalator down, went down that escalator, went by the hat. At the second I picked up the hat and I was in the line checking out, I get a text from Jonah. He sends a picture. He's standing outside of my section. He says, "Where are you?" And there was like 6 minutes left in intermission. I was like, I sent him back a picture of my hat. I was like, sorry, I chose the hat over you.
Well,
I
that's a
guess
mildly
little bit of
interesting story.
little might bore some of the viewers, but hey, I think the Sabres have been a little bit more boring throughout the year. So maybe that story is just
I
kind
think
of
the
like
moral of that story is the hat was the most is the most memorable part of that evening. You probably don't remember the game, the score, the opponent.
I actually do remember, because it was when they played the Minnesota Wild. It was the 2022-23 season. It was a Saturday night game, and they won 6-5 in overtime. It was electric. The place was sold out. The Bills played the Patriots the next day, and that was the game where Naheem Hines took the kickback. So I remember the start
That's
of the
a
game.
hell of a memory there, Nick.
Yeah, I got a great memory. I can go on and on and on. You give me games, names, plays, I can just go for days with sports. Not so much with school or anything else like that, but yeah, they did like a whole Damar Hamlin thing and stuff. It was really cool, really fun. But I always say that was kind of like the tipping point. That was the last like exciting Sabres game I've been to in person for a long, long time. It sucks because it just feels like year in, year out.
2.5 years,
There's always
right? That's 2.5 years
right.
ago.
There's always some point during the year, or during, whether it's early on in the year, whether it's the offseason, there's something where like, just like the air comes out of, like, it kind of sucks the life out of you. And it's like this year, for example, was the 13-game losing streak. Like, they kind of started off the year going, win a couple, lose a couple, win a couple, lose a couple. Like, all right, the Eastern Conference is wide open. You can sneak in. And they just go on a 13-game losing streak. And it sucks because if they just went like 4-9 during that stretch, or even 3-10, they probably are still within striking distance right now of a wild card spot. And it's like, then it makes March and April so much more fun. And, the weather's getting nice. People want to watch hockey. They want to go do the party in the plaza and everything like that. But it's just like, there seems to always be some spurt year in, year out throughout this past drought couple of years. Well, a lot of years, where it just kind of just takes the life out of you. It makes you not want to watch. So, I'd say my Sabres fandom this year was really invested early, and then after that losing streak, and you get to the winter where college basketball picks up, and my season's going over at Buff State, and it's just like it gets harder and harder to follow. And now you're at the point now where you're almost better off just selling it and just tanking and trying to get a top pick, which nobody wants to watch that.
I posed this question to Jonah last week. I'd like to get your thoughts on this, Nick. Is there anything that the Sabres can do over these last however many games? Well, we got 15, something like that, roughly, whatever it is, give or take. However, is there anything that the Sabres could do to change your opinion of what 2024, 2025 is?
Yeah, I would say, like, a lot of people, I feel like at this point now, are hoping they just tank and hoping they just blow it all up, trade everybody, fire everybody, just like off with the ship and restart. And look, I definitely see some upside to that. But the thing people forget is this was a young core that's like they've been tanking for so long anyway. Like, a lot of these players are young. They already have like a young core of guys, young guys in Rochester. Like, I'd almost rather just, as sad as to say, keep banging your head on the wall and hope like these next 15 games down the stretch, they're able to find some life, maybe get a little bit of a groove, kind of get going, and get them clicking. Lindy Ruff can maybe get them clicking, and then kind of carry that momentum over into next year. I mean, it's easier said than done, because it's unfortunate we've been sitting in the same seat as fans and as the organization has for the last however many years. So, look, I don't know if it makes most sense to just kind of give up and sell everybody, but if they were to make some changes, I definitely would understand that for sure.
16 games officially left in the season. They do have some games in hand. Most teams have played, well, a lot of teams have played 69, 70 games, but 13 games out of the wild card spot with 16 games to go. I don't think games in hand are going to come into play.
I'm very optimistic with my sports teams, but even I'm not that optimistic to keep holding out hope that they can make a run here.
College basketball, Big Four. I don't know. Are you limited in what you can really talk about? I know that you're actually being at Buffalo State as an assistant coach. It's not like you're poaching from Bonaventure or UB. Oh, you maybe could poach from UB. I don't know. What can you say? Are you limited at talking about the local scene?
I don't think anybody really knows what's going on in the NCAA right now with all these rules and all these guys are making $3 million a year to play basketball. So I think if the NCAA wants to crack down on little old Nick MacDonald from Buffalo State just shooting the shit, talking about the Big Four, I think I'll wear that violation proudly.
Rough night for Bonaventure last night.
Yeah.
Not only losing to Kent State, losing at home, and I don't know what diplomacy St. Bonaventure and Adrian Wojnarowski and Mark Schmidt had to do to appease the NIT, not only to get another bid after the disaster of last year, turning it down, the AD getting fired, etc. Losing at home, and I think the attendance, I had it
3,000, a little over 3,000.
They didn't even sell out. And the alumni bought a ton of tickets for the students, from what I understand, and the students didn't use them. I don't know. I'll throw it out there, Jonah. I know you
decent. It was, the upper sections that were really empty. And yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway. I went down to the game. I thought I was going to write a story about Bonner returning to the NIT and kind of touch back on what happened last year and why it was, kind of a big moment for Bonner culture to be back in this position, even though you'd rather be in the NCAA. But with the circumstances, it seemed like this was an appropriate end to this season and the way it went. And they got out to a 12-2 lead, made the first 5 shots, looked like they're going to run Kent State out of the gym, and then let Kent State back in the game and really got blown out in the second half. It reminded me a lot of 2016 when Bonner was a #1 seed in the NIT, but they were so disappointed about not being in the NCAA tournament that they weren't really emotionally into the game and didn't play all that hard. And I talked to one fan who's been watching a lot of Bonner games. He accused them of quitting in the second half. I don't know if I'd go that far, but they really got out rebounded and they really didn't play hard to win the game in the second half.
Would they lose by 25 or 20, 25?
I think it was 19, 75, 56. And, 2 walk-ons made big shots at the end to get it under 20. And yes, and the crowd, not really showing up and the team not really showing up in the second half. I mean, this was supposed to be such a big deal. The AD had to resign last year because they turned down the NIT bid, and the donors and the fans were so apoplectic about that. And then they didn't really show up for this game in large numbers, and they didn't play that well. They didn't take advantage of home court advantage, and it was just an overall disappointing end to the season for a team that started 14-1 and was near the top 25 and looked like a real contender in the A10 and an NCAA team, and then to lose 8, go 8-11 after that and sneak into the A10 and sneak into the NIT and not really take advantage of that opportunity. It was really a disappointing finish to a season that had so much promise at midseason.
I just wanted to see where Joe Manhertz ended up. Joe Manhertz is the athletic director who resigned, and it was a borderline scandal a year ago for turning down the NIT bid because of the history and what the NIT means to Bonaventure basketball. Of course, I think Mark Schmidt, didn't want to play in that game either. He's now the associate AD for development at Virginia Commonwealth. I don't
VCU.
know. It's VCU and the VCU's in the tournament.
Champion. Yeah.
They're in the well, okay. Joe Manhertz. Is he he's no relation to Chris Manhertz, is he?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Chris Manhertz recently re-signed by the New York Giants. What a story, right? I mean, we've talked about it before. Canisius basketball player, never wore football pads until he had a tryout with the Bills, never put a helmet on. And now here he is, still hanging around the NFL, one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL, because the guy barely runs routes, let alone catches a pass.
That is a hell of a story, and I wish I guess I'm talking to two reporters right here, and obviously you guys both do a great job at what you guys do, covering different angles of different pieces of stories. But I wish that was a story that got more national traction and national publicity. And this is a guy, if you go on his, I did it the other day because I saw when he got that contract. I went onto Sport Track or whatever you call it, and I was looking at like his contracts over the years, and his career earnings, I believe it was upwards of closer to $25-30 million in the NFL. And this is a guy who's played 10 plus years, so he's going to qualify for a pension.
This will be his 10th NFL season.
Yeah, so talk about a guy who's set for life. And as somebody who's played college basketball, there's a lot of guys who fit that mold and I think could really, follow that track record. Everybody talks about going to try and play pro, try and play overseas, try and play in the G League. But there's a lot of guys, especially you get to those power forwards and centers. There was a guy who played against Damon the other day in the NCAA tournament who I thought fit that mold too. Big, strong, physical, got quick feet. My dad always tells the story that Chris Manhertz, when he was working out at the time, training for the NFL and trying to do everything he was trying to do, he never played a down. We'd said it. He never played down in football in his life. And he told my dad the line at a summer camp this year. He said, or back then when it was happening, he was working one of my dad's camps. He said, Coach, he goes, when I first went, he goes, they handed me the pads. He's like, I didn't know how to put them on. He goes, they had to teach me like how to actually like put on the pad and like strap the helmet in and all that stuff. And it's crazy to think about. A guy goes from that 22, 23, whatever, leaving college, no idea what he's going to do with his life. He's like, all right, yeah, I'll try it. And I mean, look at how much his life has changed and how much it is for the better. I mean, unbelievable career. He set his family up for life. And I bet I don't know him personally, but I bet he's had a lot of fun doing it.
Do those career earnings include the couple $100 he might have made working camps that summer?
I don't know if those are publicized on the internet, but maybe you can publicize yours as part of Bronstein Enterprises or whatever you're going by the name now.
5-star, right?
Bronstein like Sports Plus.
Yeah.
So Manhertz, by the way, this will be his
changes than about every other company.
This will be his 11th NFL season because he had one on the practice squad with Bill's Saints.
Right.
So this is that counts towards your as an accrued season, I believe. At least it does now. Maybe it didn't back then. There's been a new CBA, but anyways, he's been around for a long time.
I don't know the exact numbers, but guys who play 11 years in the NFL, that's a small percentage.
Very small. Really, I mean, was the average career is what, like 2.5 or something like that? Maybe even smaller.
Yeah, I think that might even be for draft picks.
Right. It's crazy.
Before we get to the bracket and your picks, Nick, well, you know what? You played at Niagara. You're in this market. You pay attention. What's just your overview on Big Four basketball? We just talked about Bonaventure and that disappointment. Yeah. What's your broad strokes view of Big Four basketball? Because it's really down at the Division I level, which is what's making Damon that much more impressive at D2, which we're going to talk about quickly, or as much as you want, actually.
Yeah. To kind of wrap up the Bonaventure thing, obviously, I know, like the other Big Four schools, I know they're fighting an uphill battle in terms of like the NIL budgets and the portal and, just the ever-changing climate of not being at schools that generate football revenue and stuff like that. But I do, at the end of the day, this is all about people, and it is a people's business, and it is about, who can coach, who can play, who can develop relationships with kids. Like that aspect is never going to change, even though the monetary stuff is changing. So with Bonaventure, like with Mark Schmidt and now with Woj, helping spearhead that, like I have the utmost faith that they're going to get back to that promising, special glow that they had at the start of this season. That kind of, they hit a wall mid-season. You could definitely tell there was probably some flaws with their roster and, some challenges they faced. And, they kind of hit a wall. They got exposed a little bit in A10. Those coaches will admit and tell you, where they got to get better and what they have to do. So I expect them to kind of keep going and up on the upswing. And to be honest with you, with all the other three, I feel the exact same way. I think a lot of people spent a lot of time this year kind of killing UB, and I feel bad for the guys over there at UB because they walked into a situation where UB fans were spoiled a little bit with Nate Oates, with Bobby Hurley, with being able to win and like what they were able to do those couple of years. It just wasn't normal. It never really had been done. And George Halkovich comes in his second year, and they've been very young. They've had a lot of freshmen and sophomores, and they've lost a lot. But you got to look at kind of the baby steps and look at the growth they've taken. I think they jumped from a couple wins last year to even more this year, closer to double digits. Like, I think they'll still be able to get it rolling. And, Jim Christian at Canisius, obviously same thing. First year, gets the job kind of late, kind of has to assemble his roster kind of later than most other places do. And, all of them are fighting uphill battles with portal, with kids trying to leave and jump places, going to the high major level, or not having an NIL collective, or you could sit here and point at all the reasons they're going to struggle, but I do still think that all four coaches who are in this area and who are involved have a chance to get it rolling. I think it kind of all just kind of struck at the same time where they were all kind of down. Obviously, we talked about this last year and stuff for the people who are, but I still feel that way towards Niagara. I still have a great relationship with GP Greg Paulus. He's my guy, and I think they'll be able to get it going. They've had a lot of roster turnover over the past couple of years, but I think if he's able to get some consistency and get some guys in there over a course of time, he's going to help develop them and mold them and get them better. So it's kind of one of those things we'll see. And, not to downplay the Big Four or anything, but for the average college basketball fan in Buffalo, if you have some type of, anti-remarks towards the Big Four, you're kind of down on the whole situation, take a ride down Main Street and go to Lumsden Gymnasium at Damon. I think a lot of people did that this year. I think a lot of people saw what was good with college basketball. It was a well-run program from top to bottom, well-run athletic department from top to bottom. Let me start there because, the job that like Tracy Murphy, the athletic director, Mike Moranto, Steph Albano, like all those people who work in the administration, they were just as big as a part of the success that my dad's team was able to have this past year than people realize or give them credit for. And obviously just a great, great, great group of players. It makes it cooler too that a lot of them are local. A lot of them are Buffalo Rochester guys, and they were able to kind of get it rolling. And they experienced success early. They just kind of kept rolling, and they had such a good vibe about them. I played with every one of those guys on that team besides Matt Becker, Ronnie Williams, and a couple of freshmen they brought in. And I just obviously meeting them on their visits and playing pickup with them in the summertime and springtime. So I'm still close with those guys. Those guys are still my guys. A lot of those Justin Glovers, Ryan Salzberg, Andrew Masons, those guys are just my guys. So I had so much fun watching them this year. I'm still very, very sad that it ended and that they weren't able to make a run to the regional final and potentially the Elite Eight. But I am very proud of everything my father's been able to do, especially as a Damon alumni too, because I played there. It wears on me that way too. So I look forward to seeing how it can continue to grow and develop. And that's what my pitch would be to any Buffalo college basketball fan. You know, if you're that down on the Big Four, or you're that down on the, the current landscape of college hoops with money and portal and all that stuff, go take a ride to Damon. Come take a ride to Buff State. Come check us out. The smaller levels of college have changed for sure, but it hasn't changed as much as the higher ups, the Atlantic 10s, the Max or the Metro Atlantic. So we'll see how it keeps evolving. But I know for one thing is that at the end of the day, it's all going to be about the people and the kids, no matter how much. I think a lot of the NIL stuff, although it's a big factor for sure, it does get a little bit overflown. The teams that pay the most don't always just win the most. And we'll get to that. And once we start breaking down the tournament stuff, it's never just the teams that spend. It doesn't always correlate to wins.
What Damon has in their program is really what's missing from a lot of Division I basketball, and especially mid to low major Division I basketball, which is continuity on the roster, players that come back year to year, that fourth and fifth year seniors, so their personalities, their stories. A lot of the kids and the families that go to Damon games know these players from working the camps. The Division I schools aren't even doing day camps this year. So you're out there, you're at these games, who the people are. They're not largely, but there's enough local players, and you remember their stories from high schools. The Canisius, Niagara, and UB really aren't recruiting the local high schools that much these days. Bonnet is a little bit more. Maybe Canisius is, but, UB has not been doing that, and Niagara hasn't had a local player in a good long time. And, it just makes it easier to follow, more fun to root for. College basketball is really hard to get into these days because you just don't know who's on the teams year to year. You don't get connected to the players being there for 4 years. You do get connected to players, and then they leave and new players come in. It just makes it harder and harder to enjoy the college basketball product. Even though these players do have the right to go in the portal and make as much money as they can, it just hurts it, I think, from the fan appeal perspective. And, St. Bonaventure, as disappointing as the finish of the season was, and they didn't I think they met their preseason expectations, if not exceeded them a little bit, but they didn't meet where the expectations were when they got reset around midseason with the start that they had or the hopes that they had and what they could do. But they're in such better shape, I think, than Canisius Niagara and UB. Having Woj as the GM, having an NIL collective, having the support that they do get at the Riley Center, which is more than any of the other local teams get. Being in the A10, which is a 1-bid league now, but still could be a 2 or a 3-bid league in the right year and the right circumstances. And Mark Schmidt is their coach. They just have a lot of things going for them where I think they can navigate this NIL era and the transfer portal era and keep some of their good players. Melvin Council said last night that he's leaning towards coming back to St. Bonaventure. You usually don't have mid-major stars doing that these days, that he can go make more money somewhere else. We'll see if that's really how it happens. But, the way he sounded last night, it sounds like he wants to be back at St. Bonaventure. They have the opportunity to, one, be a more competitive program, and two, keep players and keep personalities that will engage the fan base and make them more fun to follow and more fun to watch. UB, not only are they not recruiting local players, but they're building around youth, which is really hard to do in mid and low major basketball these days, because their best freshman's now in the transfer portal, Ben Michaels. So you get a good player and he's gone before you can develop him into what you really need him to be. And the way to win at that level right now is getting transfers, bounce back transfers from high majors and junior college guys and things like that, and older players. And UB's not doing that. So I don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to be that much better in a year or two unless they change their recruiting strategy and really have a much different looking roster. And still, then you lose the players that and the fans got to know. And I think the most disappointing thing with UB is really how they've killed the fan interest that was so strong with Nate Oates and things like that, and even carried over a little bit with Jim Weitzel as the coach. And now nobody goes to the games, and really they barely know who's on the team. And it's really hard to get into this team and care about this team the way they've been performing and, the direction of the program.
My son goes to UB. He loves college basketball. And when I ask him about going to the games, he looks at me like I'm an idiot. Like, why would he go to UB basketball games? He'd rather watch something on TV or watch the Sabres, whatever, play video games than in his dorm room than go to Alumni Arena. Real quick, I want to mention that I thought it was funny when you're talking about maybe the infrastructure that St. Bonaventure has, especially with Adrian Wojnarowski and the commitment that they're having. I'm sure huge pay cut from ESPN, I'm sure, but he's not doing it for free. But when I talked to Adrian Wojnarowski last week for the feature story that I did on Damon's undefeated basketball program, he was in Serbia. So he's recruiting, looking for the next Vlade Divac, I suppose. And who knows what he can come up with, but Adrian Wojnarowski probably is more of a known commodity than most basketball people on the other side of the planet because of the work that he's done at ESPN and his previous stops. A segue, I think, Jonah, too, from Damon and what's going on there. You mentioned continuity and what wins at the Division I level. Let's take what has happened at Damon and apply it to, say, Drake. And John Beeline raised this issue when I spoke to him for the Damon story. Drake gets a Division II basketball coach who brings his players from Northwest Missouri State, 4 Division II starters, I think. The program's gutted because they lose their coach, and they think, all right, we don't want to stick around for a reset. Drake's coach comes in. He needs reinforcements. He just brings his players with him. He's got a ready-made team, and they win 30 games. Their conference, they're in the NCAA tournament. I don't want to, again, this is you're a bit of a biased observer here, Nick, but what about the concept of a Mike MacDonald going to a UB? You talk about UB and they can't keep isn't there potentially a ready-made dangerous team if a Division II coach can bring his players, because continuity is so important? And that's what Drake probably capitalized on. Talent, yes, they have to be talented enough to win the games. But when you are a set program of dudes who know the system, who know the calls, who have played together, knows where his teammate's going to be on any given part of the court at any given time. And you're playing against other teams in your conference that are constantly hitting the reset button with NIL and transfer portal and all that stuff. Couldn't a Division II team just be like, here we go, UB, here we go, Canisius, here we go, and Mercyhurst, Robert Morris, whatever, throw your team out there and say, we're going to be one of the best teams in our conference automatically.
What I would say to that is I'm glad you mentioned that too, because once we get to talking to the bracket, I was going to 100% bring up Drake. I have them making a run in my bracket. They've been very, very fun to watch. Ben McCollum was like the synonym for winning at the Division II level. He turned that program into a literal national powerhouse, winning multiple national championships, sending guys to the NBA. I mean, they were unbelievable. And it took him a while to land on his feet and get a Division I job. But when he did get to Drake, like you said, he brought everybody, and they've been having such success this year, winning 30 games and everything. I want to reference there's a video that went viral about a year or two ago from Bruce Pearl, who's the head coach at Auburn. Number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. And when he was speaking to,
he's now fully legal. I mean, used to be known as one of the dirtiest basketball coaches ever. And now he's fine because the rules have changed.
Yeah. NIL, now it's legal. That's what it stands for. But no, there was a video of him either before or after an Auburn basketball practice. He was talking to a group of high school kids, and he was explaining to them, about the whole how it works, getting recruited in the college industry and stuff like that. And he referenced how he was a Division II coach at one point. And he told them all, he said, and I vividly remember this line, he told them, he said, I want to let you guys know right now. He goes, high major Division II is better than low major Division I. And, to those kids and to a lot of people who just kind of follow college basketball casually or to the naked eye, you're saying, what? Like D1 is higher than D2? That makes no sense. As somebody who played low major Division I and high major Division II at Damon, because I always classify, and Damon just, soared through those expectations here. I used to always tell people, like, being at Damon, we're a high major D2 program. Like, we're like a top tier Division II program. They turned themselves this year into the top Division II program, being the number 1 team in the country for a long stretch of the season. But there is a lot of truth to that. There is not that big of a gap between Division I and Division II. And I think it's been like that for years. You could argue that, look, the portal and, guys not getting recruited out of high school much has made that level stronger. I'm not going to speculate on that, but what I will say is being at Damon, being at a high major Division II program, playing against other high major Division II programs, playing against St. Thomas Aquinas, who's always regionally ranked, always nationally ranked, playing against other teams in the East region, going out of region and playing like a West Liberty or like a West Texas A&M, Minnesota Moorhead we played in my first year. I mean, St. Anselm is in our region. They're located out in New Hampshire. They're always a powerhouse. Like, you play against these teams and you see these guys and you're like, yeah, like these guys belong in that same arena that we're talking about. They belong in this group of 64, 68 team bracket that we're about to see unfold these next weeks or two. It's like there's a lot of guys, and it's funny because a lot of you see it now because now that I'm out of it, I'm not playing anymore. But there you see guys who I've played against last year, 2 years ago, and where's he? He's at Iona, right? Where's he? He's at this school. He's at that school. Like, guys are able to bounce around now because they have that freedom of movement with the portal, with the transfer rules. But I always like pointing that out to kids, right? And I always just try to tell them, like, number one, I feel like, kids who always ask me for advice about recruiting and stuff like that, I always tell them the same thing. With the climate that we're in right now, if you have any opportunity to get to any NCAA level out of high school, you got to take it. I don't care if it's D2. I don't care if it's D3. I don't care if it's D1. Maybe a little hypocritical because I'm a guy that went to prep school for a year and chased the Division I offer. I tell people all the time, if I went to prep school nowadays, I wasn't sniffing the Division I offer. Like, it never would have happened. It's a different timeline. So I just want kids to be able to go where they're able to play and where they're going to be happy. And, when you break down the levels and stuff, like we played Division III this year. I was a coach at Buff State. There was guys on the floor that I could say, yeah, he probably could play at the Division II level, or yeah, he could probably play a little bit higher. But look, it doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. If you're out of spot and you're playing, you're winning, you're having fun, you should just enjoy it. And that's what I'm glad I was able to do in my last 3 years of college at Damon. And that line always stuck with me from Bruce Pearl: high major Division II being better than low major Division I. There is so much truth to that, and I'm glad that kids and parents and families got to see that this year firsthand with Damon. You know, maybe they took their kid to that Damon UB game and they saw, you know, a UB team lose to Damon. And granted, it's an exhibition game, it doesn't count, but still, like, Damon went in there and beat them. And it was like, okay, like, these guys can play in that arena. They belong on that court. Like the Ryan Salzbergs, the Andrew Masons, you know, the Justin Glovers, the Justin Hempfields, the guys who are Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse guys who never were recruited at that level out of high school. They're able to walk into that arena and say, like, yeah, I belong here. Like, I deserve to be on here. And Drake has been proving that all year long, no matter who they've played against, in conference, out of conference. They've been proving that.
Well, let's remember too that UB tried to hire Ben McCullum 2 years ago and couldn't really close the deal. From what I heard, he wanted to stay in the Midwest. That, you know, Buffalo was too far away from where he wanted to make his next move, and he knew he'd have maybe other opportunities in the future. But, you know, in a different scenario, Buffalo could be Drake now with that team and making a run into the NCAA tournament. You know, maybe and then they got to a point where UB really had to try to win the press conference, but maybe if Damon was #1 in the country and undefeated and beaten UB in an exhibition game that season, that makes it a little bit easier for UB to pivot and look at the local Division II and hire Mike MacDonald to do something similar at UB. And I don't know, maybe there's a scenario in the future where that happens. And that brings me to a quick point I wanted to make about St. Bonaventure, and that Mark Schmidt is one of the best things that's ever happened to that basketball program, that athletics program, that university. What he did coming in when they were in some really dark days and turning that program around and being a great coach and winning and no scandals. And year after year, they've been very competitive, and they should be happy to have him as the coach for as long as he wants to be the coach. But if he decides to retire in 2 years when his contract's up, and there's some belief in the basketball circles in Western New York that could happen. He even kind of hinted it a little bit on this podcast last summer. If he makes that decision, from what I understand, he's got a $1.8 million salary that the donors are largely paying for. The next coach maybe doesn't need to make that much money, and you have more money to put into NAL, more to get players. You know, there could be, but not where they get better without Mark Schmidt, but more money to work with this transfer portal NIL situation with a different coach. And who knows, maybe there's a coach that was good college buddies with the general manager that is one at the Division II level that, you know, could be the right fit there. And with a lot of money to get some really good players, maybe bring a few of his own players and things like that. I mean, I think there's a scenario where that could really work at St. Bonaventure, an alumnus of the school. I mean, I don't know if there's a guy like that out there, but if they could find that type of person, I think that's a good fit. And that's a scenario that, I mean, I don't want to say that St. Bonaventure should be looking forward to making a coaching change. I think if Mark Schmidt wants to coach there another 10 years, they should give him a 10-year contract. But if Mark Schmidt decides on his own that he doesn't want to coach there much longer, and, you know, things are still in the situation they're in right now, I think there's a good fit potentially there at St. Bonaventure for their next move.
Your thoughts, Nick?
I'm gonna not comment on that. I don't want to say anything that's going to incriminate myself. I will say to what you said there about Mark Schmidt, as long as he wants to coach St. Bonaventure, they need to honor that, because that dude has done a hell of a job there. He is, I mean, I don't know what the rules are in terms of like when you can go to the Hall of Fame there, or get the court named after you, or get your number or name in the rafters. Like, he belongs in all of that. He's done such a good job there. And, you know, look, I'm sure a lot of Bonaventure fans, the blessing and the curse with Bonaventure fans is how loyal they are. But I feel like sometimes they can definitely be impatient, and they can definitely, you know, be a little frustrated. They've been that way for years. But look, that is definitely a job where you're going to have the loyalist support out of any team, probably in the Atlantic 10 and maybe even in the country. I mean, they go all over the place, and there's always people and Bonnie's fans everywhere. It's such a good support system. And, you know, I think Schmidt realizes that, and I think hopefully him and Woj can really get it going and get it back to that prominence. Because like we've just been talking about, there hasn't really been a team other than Damon this year, and I would argue for the past couple of years, to kind of really cultivate, you know, the hoops heads in the area and really get them to garner support. You know, I think Damon, we've been able to do it for the past couple of years. Obviously this year more than any other year combined, but The more positive stuff that comes out of, colleges and universities and their college basketball teams, the better for this area. And hey, I will just say that's what we're trying to and striving to do at Buff State, with my guy Mike Birkin, who's our head coach. And we had a great first year, step in the right direction, got a lot of good young talent, and I think we're going to be able to get it going here. So hopefully we can kind of join that conversation with the Damons, the Bonaventures, in terms of fan support and getting people in the area talking and buzzing about us.
Or maybe they can hire Kyle Husband or Billy Beeline or another coach that's won a lot at a lower level.
Yeah, we got the more we give all those guys the flowers, the better, because what Billy's been able to do, and obviously what Kyle's been able to do, and all these coaches and all these personalities in the area. That's what I mean. I think a lot of people just spend a lot of time, talking about and tweeting about and reporting about the NIL, and like I get it, like it's just, but at the end of the day, it's always going to be about the people. It's always going to be about the guys on the floor and all that type of stuff. I don't think that will ever change.
I don't know if we want to go pick for pick in this NCAA tournament bracket, or we just want to do your favorite picks, maybe the lower seeds or the upsets that go the farthest. I don't know. How do you want to do this, Nick?
I say we go. I'm kind of looking at the bracket right now, kind of thinking to myself. I say we go kind of region by region, and kind of just like I can give you. How about I'll give you I'll give you who I have winning the region. Obviously, I'll give you an up.
Help me out by just, everything moves around. You have different regions playing at the same site. It's not. I get a little confused. So when you mention the region, don't do East, Midwest, any of that shit. Just give me do the Duke region, the Auburn region, the Florida region. You know what I mean? Where do you want to start?
I'll start in the Auburn region.
Okay.
I'll start in the Auburn region. So
or
what I'll do is
Auburn side of the bracket, I should say, right?
Yeah, I'll do that whole stuff, but we'll start in the Auburn region. I do have Auburn winning that region. I think they've been that dominant all year. I think they're very veteran. They're very old. I read somewhere the other day that their average age is older than the average age. Their starting five average age is older than the starting five's average age for the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Oklahoma City
they're
Thunder,
older than the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, well, yeah, but the Oklahoma City Thunder are the number one seed in the Western Conference, the NBA, and they have a lot of young guys. And I know this is an NBA podcast, but it just goes to show how much older college basketball teams have gotten over the past couple of years with the portal, with the JUCO stuff, with everything, getting extra years eligibility and stuff like that. And older, more experienced tend to usually do better. I'm just gonna say, you said Jonah put it in the comments section here for our viewers that they're older than the WIVB staff. So I don't know about that, but I wasn't able to keep it. I couldn't hold back my laughter on that one.
He snitched on you, Jonah.
Yeah, there's no proof that I actually said that. I mean, that's Nick playing a practical joke on us there.
Oh, anyway, back to it. One upset pick I actually have. This is a wild pick. What I'll do is I'll give you who I have winning the region. I'll give you an upset pick, and I'll give you kind of like the matchup I'm really looking forward to in this region. So in this region, obviously I have Auburn winning. I think the experience wins. An upset pick I have UC San Diego winning that first round matchup against Michigan for no apparent reason other than the fact that last week during Champ Week, I stayed up late and I was watching the Big West Conference tournament, and I saw UC San Diego playing at midnight on the East Coast, and they were really good. I mean, they had 30 wins this year. They have talent. Former Division II program too. Fun fact: they transitioned to D1 I think around 2011, 2012. But I will say the matchup I'm looking forward to the most in this region is the one right there at the bottom, and it would be a second round matchup, and I'm hoping there's no upsets that kind of blow it open, but I really want to see Marquette versus Michigan State. I think that would be incredible. I think the guard matchup right there, Michigan State has Jason Richardson, the former NBA player, his son, who played at Michigan State for Tom Izzo. His son is probably going to be a first round pick. He's that good. He's that special, and he's a freshman. And Cam Jones is the opposite. He's an experienced 4-year guy who's been at Marquette, and he's an All-American. And for the people who are anti transfer portal and anti all that type of stuff, you should watch Marquette, because Shaka Smart's able to get guys there for 3-4 years and mold them, and there are a lot of homegrown guys, and they've been special to watch. I actually have Marquette making a little bit of a run. I have them winning that matchup and going all the way to the Elite Eight. I'm that much of a believer in what Shaka Smart's been able to do with that program the past couple of years.
Jonah, your thoughts on that regional?
I like UC San Diego as another upset pick, even though I kind of like the Western New York stories, and they play Michigan with Roddy Gale, Niagara Falls native. Also have, Ward Manuel, the former UBAD, is the AD at Michigan. But UC San Diego turns teams over. I think they have two guards that are in the top 5 nationally in steals, and I think that their style of play and being a little bit different than the Big Ten teams that Michigan plays really gives them a lot of upset potential there.
I have very few thoughts on this. I'm no expert, but I do get into tournament basketball quite. I mean, I love it. And so this is just my, recency bias of having seen them play. I'm surprised that Creighton's a 9 seed. I think Creighton's a dangerous team. Of course, they're going to have to go through Auburn in the second round. So I agree with you there, Nick. I was looking forward to maybe Creighton being a team that made a deep run. I also want to ask, and I know that your family has some history, Nick, with this conference. I always like to know about the Ivies. The Ivies have a lot of success, I think, relative their seeding over the years. They're the 13th seed going up against Texas A&M. Any thoughts on Yale?
Yeah, watched Yale play a couple times this year, and I watched them play in the conference championship game the other day against Cornell. They're good. If they weren't matched up with Texas A&M and they were matched up with maybe another 4 seed, I probably would have picked them because they share the ball really well. They got size, they got length, but I just think the matchup with A&M is just too much to overcome. I think A&M's very, very, very talented. They're one of those SEC teams that probably, if they weren't in the SEC, they'd probably be a top 3, top 2 seed anywhere else because they probably would have ran through any other conference. But in just the loaded SEC, you're going to lose games, you're going to fall to teams. But they got guards who could score, they got big guys who are strong and athletic. I think A&M handles them in that one. But you hit the nail on the head. The Ivy League teams, they're always a tough out. So I bet, as bad as I'm saying over here, saying A&M's a tough matchup for Yale, I bet a lot of people are saying the vice versa and saying like, oh, A&M might struggle with Yale, like it might work the other way. So we'll see. That's kind of the beauty of the tournament. That's why these 1-game scenarios are really tough to predict. And if there's any loyal fans who watched last year, you'll remember that I had Creighton winning the entire thing. And that sure tanked my bracket. A lot of people, although you guys are referring to me as experts, I think if there's any loyal fans that watch this, they're going to say this kid is not an expert. This kid has no idea what the hell he's talking about. So I'm honored that I still have that expert title, but I gotta earn it this year.
You're the Tim Graham and Friends college basketball analyst.
I got to add that to my LinkedIn.
Before, yeah, hit the top. Before we switch to a different bracket, I want to ask both of your guys' thoughts on North Carolina because they're a lightning rod. People hate them. They had such a weird season. Hadn't beat a ranked team, I don't think, since December. And people were wondering, do they deserve to even be in the field? They're in the playoff game last night against San Diego State and just totally outclassed them. I think San Diego State was a 4.5-point underdog and ended up losing by 30 or something like that. North Carolina, obviously the pedigree or the history. What are your thoughts on where that program is and their deservingness of being in the tournament and in this seed?
To me, so I will say this, and I'll be very honest about it. I didn't pick them to win. I picked Ole Miss to win that game. But to me, and this will resonate with some Western New York fans who root for Syracuse. I know Syracuse wasn't very good this year, but in years past, this North Carolina team reminds me a lot of some of those Syracuse teams towards the end of Boeheim's career, where they would maybe sneak in as like a Dayton team in the play-in, or maybe they would get a seed and be like, how did Syracuse get a 10 seed, or how are they a 9 seed? Like, you kind of look at it, like scratch your head and be like, wow, no way, that's stupid. And sure enough, it's like, uh-oh, here they go. They get a good draw, they get a good matchup, the zone worked to their favor, and bam, they rattle them off. Next thing you look and you're like, Syracuse is in the Final Four. They made a Cinderella run in the Final Four. I got those same vibes last night when I was on my couch watching the North Carolina-San Diego State game, and I see veteran guards, Elliot Cadeau, RJ Davis. I see these guys who are familiar faces with the tournament, and like you said, they're just outclassing them, and they're killing them, and it kind of felt like, oh boy, here we go. Like there's no in between for me with North Carolina. I either feel like, after watching last night, I'm either fully convinced they're going to go to the Final Four, or I'm fully convinced that they're just going to be like, what they've been all year, very inconsistent, and they'll lose a game to Ole Miss. They'll go from looking like the greatest team to the worst team. So I kind of just try to stay away from that, but it would not shock me if this is the team that we're talking about in a few weeks and you're saying, uh-oh, here they go. They're 1 or 2 games away from San Antonio. Uh-oh, here they go. They're going to San Antonio. Like they have all the pieces to do it. We'll see if they do it.
There's a team or two every year that gets in as an at-large, and there's some perception and outrage that they didn't deserve it, and then they make a bit of a run and kind of prove the unpredictability of the NCAA tournament, and maybe that either the committee made a good decision or that the criticism was unwarranted. And sometimes it's just randomness. But teams like North Carolina that come from competitive leagues, yeah, North Carolina didn't beat a ranked team all year. They went 1-12 in quad one games, but they played 13 quad one games. So they're experienced in playing good teams, playing on the road. They were in a lot of those games. I mean, I don't think they're going to go to the Final Four, win a national championship, but outperforming their seed and going a little bit further than some people think they are, and proving that maybe they belonged in the tournament. I mean, it's North Carolina. They get
Right.
5-star recruits year after year and good transfers. And, to see them win a few games in the NCAA tournament shouldn't be all that surprising.
100%.
What region you want to go to next?
We can just stay right down there. We'll go to the Florida region.
Okay.
With Florida. I kind of coined this as I was filling it out. This is like my region of upsets a little bit. I have 2 teams in the Elite Eight that I don't think many people will have in theirs. I have Maryland beating Drake to go to the Final Four. So I have Maryland kind of getting out of that little quadrant with Memphis and Colorado State and all them. And I have them knocking off Florida. Kind of an upset pick for sure. A lot of people are really picking Florida. They really are all over them. They're that talented. My cousin, who was actually in town the other day for the Damon games, he said this Florida team, he's from Connecticut, my cousin. He said this Florida team is giving me UConn vibes from the past 2 years with the way they just roll teams. So they have every piece you could to win a national championship. And it's funny that they're going to probably have to go through the reigning 2-time champs who are going for a three-peat in that second round of 32, if they're able to get to that point, which I think they will. But I'm just going to go off a limb and kind of, embrace the madness a little bit and kind of go with a little outlandish pick. I'm going to go with Maryland to upset them and get to the Final Four. Derek Queen, if you don't know the name, learn the name. 6'10" freshman who will probably be the lottery pick this year in the NBA. And I think he's every bit as talented as any guy in this tournament and definitely in that region. He can really play. And their guards that they play are very veteran. They're juniors and seniors. So I do think there's something to be said about, they always say guard play wins March. Well, I'm going to go one step further and say experienced guard play wins in March, and guys who have been there before done that. So down towards the bottom, St. John's has been a really cool story, really great story. I definitely think they're good enough to probably get to a Final Four, but I worry about them in a 1-game setting with just how much they struggle offensively. I know they are probably the best defensive team in the country, but at some point they're going to have to run into some trouble where they're going to have to score the ball. And I like how Drake's been this year. I really do. Obviously, there's some D2 love affair bias in that for sure, but we just spent a whole bunch of time talking about Ben McCollum and what they do. And I think they're really poised to go on a run. I actually have them lucking out. I have UNC Wilmington upsetting Texas Tech. So I think they might have an easy little run there to get to the Sweet 16 potentially. And you get to a 1-game scenario against St. John's, anything can happen.
The one game you didn't mention is the one game where I see an upset, only because, and I don't know a ton about Arkansas, I'll be honest, but I've seen Kansas play a lot this year. And every time I see them play, they look like who? I mean, that team is like maddening to watch. Their best players can't make a shot. I mean, they just look like they fall apart. And I don't know. It just, and again, that might be the bias of the fact that every time I happen to see them play, they had a bad performance, because I know they're a good team, but it's just I can't picture it. So that could be another upset loss in there. I just not sold on Kansas. How about that Drake? I just want to just touch real quick, because you mentioned Drake, and I know you got maybe you're a little biased there because of the D2 part. But Missouri, is that one of the best matchups in terms of 2 great stories? Because Missouri was supposed to be dirt this year, and they had a great season. So it's a shame that they're playing each other in the first round.
Right. Dennis Gates did an incredible job, when he was at Cleveland State, and then getting this job. He just kind of, is able to keep that success rolling. They were awful last year. I don't think they won a game in conference play, but they were able to bounce back and go better than ever. It's definitely gonna be a cool storyline, cool matchup. What does worry me a little bit is when everybody's talking about a team as an upset, right? And I feel like everybody turn on the TV, oh, Drake's gonna be able to do this, Drake's gonna be able to do it. But I'm still drinking the Drake Kool-Aid just because I've seen him play a couple times this
Right.
year. And I think they're all that good. And I think those guys, we spent a whole bunch of time talking about the D2, D1 level, and I don't need to keep harping on that, but they're good enough to make a run. And to go to your point about that Kansas Arkansas game, 100%. Like, Kansas has been very, very shaky, very up and down, very streaky this year. It's always funny to me though when the NCAA committee says, like, well, we don't look at matchups or anything, or storylines and stuff. And in that back little corner of their eye or corner of their brain, they're thinking about it. As long as St. John's gets past Omaha, you're going to have Rick Pitino's team going up against either one of the most storied programs in college basketball with Kansas, or one of the most storied head coaches in all the sport. You're going to have Pitino, Calipari, or you're going to have Pitino versus Kansas. I mean, that is just made for television right there. And it always cracks me up when the NCAA tries to say, like, we don't really look at that type of stuff. They know what's going to get the ratings. They know what's coming. So that sets up for a very cool second round matchup, as long as St. John's is able to get past Omaha, which I think they will, between those two teams. That's kind of one of those games where I picked Arkansas. I agree with you, Tim, but I'm just going to be sitting back watching that saying, like, let's see how this unfolds, because I have no idea. Both teams have been very all over the place this year.
Yeah, Hunter Dickinson is one of the most frustrating basketball players for me to watch. He's 7'1", and yes, he averages, I think, 18 points and 10 rebounds. But the way he plays, or the many shots as he takes, he should be averaging, 28 and 15 or something like that. It's just like, anyways, that's my rudimentary thought on watching Kansas play.
Hunter Dickinson's parents from Hamburg and once considered coming here and playing for St. Francis High School.
That's right. He was at Michigan, and
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I forgot that there was a local story there with Hunter Dickinson.
Yep.
Okay, which bracket next?
I'd say we go up top on the other one with
Duke?
With Duke. Yeah, with
All
Duke.
right, the Duke bracket, or the Duke regional.
So I have Duke winning it all in this region. I do think Duke is very fun to watch. As a guy I've never been a Duke lover or a Duke hater. I've always kind of been very neutral towards Duke, but sometimes they can be a little annoying. They can piss you off. Definitely one of the most enjoyable Duke teams to watch. And as long as I can remember, John Shire has done an incredible job coaching them. And they got just likable play. Like, Cooper Flagg, I think, is every bit as good as advertised. Con Knippel's really good. Isaiah Evans off the bench, I think, is one of the most talented players that doesn't get talked about. I do have them winning this region. The only thing that I think could hold them back would be the ankle of Cooper Flagg, depending on how he's able to go, if that affects his long-term ability to play a lot of minutes, or if maybe he misses a matchup, or if he comes down and re-rolls it. I mean, knock on wood, you never want to see that happen. But kind of the matchup I'm looking forward to / upset in this region is we talked a lot about the Atlantic 10 and Bonaventure. I'm all in on the VCU Rams. There's a little bit of bias to that one towards me. Obviously, me and Jonah talked about Matt Hart, who is a Buffalo guy, was an all-Western New York player here, and went on to play in college at Hamilton and George Washington. Now he's coaching. He's currently coaching at VCU as an assistant coach, but he was my assistant coach for 1 year at Damon. I always say Coach Hart, that dude is like another big brother to me. And I went down there this summer, was able to work their camp, meet some of their guys, meet some of the other coaches, just great people, great dudes, great players too. They won a lot of games this year. They were a little rocky to start the year. I followed them a lot. They were a little rocky to start the year. This is a team that I think is every bit as good to get to a Final Four. I truly believe that. And they have, Max Schulg is an NBA type player. They have veteran guards, Phil Russell, Zeb Jackson. Those guys can play. Those guys have been all across the country, played at multiple different programs. They've kind of just clicked and gotten hot at the right time. Early on, Jonah will remember, because we were at this game together, the New Year's Eve game at St. Bonaventure, that St. Bonaventure beat VCU. And VCU was kind of a little bit of a mess. I want to say they had like 4 or 5 losses early on, and some close ones, some weird losses. They lost to Seton Hall, which didn't make a lot of sense because Seton Hall was down this year. And, VCU was uberly talented, was picked to finish really high, everything. And they were kind of struggling a little bit. And as soon as that calendar clicked to January, February, it was like, uh-oh, here they go. And they kind of ran through the A-10. So I am very excited to see what they can do. I have them going all the way to the Elite Eight. I do think they're that good. I think they're good enough to get to a Final Four. If something were
Are you
able
picking
to
with your
happen
heart on
the
that
other
though,
side of
Nick?
the bracket, it's a mix between the heart and the brain. I really do. I see them getting out of that little region and getting to the Sweet 16 at the least. That's
Alabama,
the second
they'd have
pick,
to get
them
through
over
Alabama for that, right?
Well, to the Sweet 16, they have to get through BYU and they'd have to get through Wisconsin most likely.
Oh, I'm
The
sorry.
Sweet 16 game would
yeah. I'm sorry.
yeah. To
Alabama's
get to the
down
Elite
at
Eight,
number
they'd have
two
to
at
beat
the second.
Alabama.
Number two.
I will
Got it.
say, I'll put my hand up and admit them over Alabama is definitely a little bit of a heart pick. But with my brain as a basketball fan and a basketball brain, I watch this team and I see a team that can get out of their little quadrant and get to the second weekend. I don't know, Jonah, you've seen them play a couple times too. Do you want to back me up or slander me on that one? Because I'm very curious. Because
I'd like your thoughts on Nate Oates' season and the team that he has this year. Because I know you guys, watch the former UB coach throughout the course of the campaign.
I saw VCU lose against Bonn. I've seen them a little bit on TV. I mean, they are a really good team, really good shooting and scoring team. I do think they have some good potential here as an 11 seed to pull off an upset. I don't know. The Atlantic 10 is a really tough league, but I think it's been a while since an Atlantic 10 team made much of a run in the NCAA tournament. And when they do, sometimes it's like Dayton and they're really highly seeded. So I don't know if I love their potential to be a Final Four contender. I think Alabama, not maybe quite as good as they were a year ago in some of their Final Four teams, but still really good and flirted with being number one in the country at times this season. I don't know who's going to win these games. I mean, it's hard to follow college basketball these days with all the roster turnover, and I'm covering the local teams. I don't even cover, national college basketball or pay attention to it like I used to growing up. But I like to look for the local connections, and this region has Alabama and Nate Oates that had, the Western New York ties with that being the former Buffalo coach. It has the champion of the Atlantic 10 and the champion of the MAC in Akron, and there's reasons why, if you're a Buffalo or a St. Bonaventure fan, why you want those teams to win a round or two. It brings more money into the league, exposure, more in VCU Atlantic 10 case. If they make a run, it makes more justification to potentially having that be a multiple bid league in the future. Mike Meniga, in Oregon, a number 5 seed in this region, an assistant coach, another coach that maybe UB could have hired or should have taken a stronger look at the top of that bracket. I mean, I still think Duke is the favorite to win it all. As Nick said, the Cooper Flag injury is hanging over them, but they won the ACC tournament without him, and they don't really need him in these early games. So I do think that as long as he can get healthy by the second weekend of the tournament, that they're still, back to being probably the favorite to win it all. And, we'll see. But I do think there's local rooting interest on all of these, on a number of these teams in this region. And going back to the last region, I like Florida for some of the local rooting interest, with Carlin Hartman, the former Grand Island player, being on the staff, Jonathan Sapphire also on the staff from Williamsville North, and they've been really good all year. And I think Florida is a Final Four potential team. I like the Drake story, and I like their chances of maybe beating Missouri in the first round. I think they have a really tough matchup with Texas Tech in the second round. But yeah, I kind of look for the local stories, who to root for, and then maybe, that we'll be writing about or finding reasons to talk about later on in the tournament. And you see a lot of that here in this Duke corner of the region.
And now down to the who we missing?
Houston.
The Houston region.
Well, I'll just rip the Band-Aid off. Spoiler alert. I have Houston winning the national championship. I have them making it out of this region, and I have them winning it all. I have them winning it all over Auburn. So I guess I'm jumping gun here a little bit, but
No, that's
I
all
think
right.
Houston. This is the team. Houston. It gives me a couple years ago, when Baylor won the tournament during the COVID pandemic year. They give me vibes of this team a little bit, because for a while, those Baylor teams with Scott Drew were always kind of knocking on the door. They never really had much. They had a lot of success in their conference tournament, the regular season, being ranked high. They never really had much like tournament success to show for in terms of going to Final Fours or getting to national championship games. And then it all just kind of clicked. And this is a Houston team that is very veteran. Very similar to what we were talking about earlier with Marquette. They got guys that have been bred through this program 2, 3, 4 years, have really developed and come up with Coach Kelvin Sampson, who's one of the best coaches in the country. It's a good blend. The knock on Houston that a lot of teams have is, well, they can guard, but they can't score. And they're going to get into a tournament setting and they're not going to be able to score the ball. This year, I watched a couple of their games in the Big 12. They are really able to fill it up. LJ Cryer is one of the best scorers in the country. I truly believe that, even though he doesn't average a whole lot because he doesn't have to, because he's surrounded with other guys. They've got like 4 or 5 guys who average double figures. I think this is a team that's been knocking on the door for a while. And they're probably going to get, I think they're going to get to the Final Four and play Duke. And a lot of people forget that last year, they were a Jamal Shed ankle injury away from beating Duke, and they were probably one of the only teams that could guard and contend with a UConn, right? And we saw UConn kind of cakewalk to a national championship because they were that much better than people. But I really think Houston has been on that doorstep of breaking through that door of getting to the Final Four and getting to the national championship for a while. They got to the Final Four a little while back, and I think the COVID year, but they've been right there. And I think it does help them a little bit too. I think a lot of people are talking about the other 3 number 1 seeds. They're talking about Auburn and how dominant they've been. They talk about Florida's probably the hottest team in the country. They've been talking about them. Duke's probably the best all-around team. They've been talking about them, talking about flags, injuries, some of that. Nobody said anything really about Houston. So it kind of makes me feel a little weird, like, because I never usually pick kind of like a team to win. I always kind of am very outlandish. Like we referenced last year, I picked Creighton to win it. I think Creighton was a 3 or 4 seed. I'm always kind of leaning towards like a cool story or something, some odd pick to be like my national champion. And it feels a little weird to have 30-4 Houston, who's the number 1 overall seed, as my national champion. But they're probably one of the most slept on number 1 seeds that I can remember in the past couple of years of following this tournament. I think they're that good. To kind of preview a little bit, I think them seeing Kentucky potentially in the Elite Eight could be a very fun game. I've had a lot of fun watching Kentucky this year. What Mark Popes did with Kentucky, taking in a whole new roster, whole group of transfers, and getting them to play structured, team-oriented, high-level offensive basketball, running a ton of sets, just playing the right way. They have some games where they score. I don't know if they're good enough to guard, and maybe I could see them getting upset maybe some point early just because they don't guard well, but they can really score. If you like offensive basketball, turn on a Kentucky game. You'll really enjoy it. Of course, now that I say that, I just jinxed it. You're going to turn on the first round game. They're going to score like 45 points probably. So that's kind of how this tournament goes. But I'm all in on Houston. I really am. I think they're that good. I think Kelvin Sampson is that good of a coach, and they're my pick to cut down the Nets in their home state of San Antonio.
Jonah, your thoughts on this bracket?
My main thought on this bracket, this probably has the least local connection, so I won't go that route here. Gonzaga's underseeded as an 8. I think they have potential to beat Houston in that second round. They're top 10 in the KenPom rankings, and have history of making runs in this tournament under Mark Few. And then down at the bottom, I don't have strong opinions about too many of these teams or too many upsets. I kind of think probably maybe pick Gonzaga to come out of it. And if not, I mean, Houston is a national championship contender. If they get through that second round game, I also like their chances. McNeese, I like McNeese just because they make these TikTok videos with the manager rapping along to songs. They're also a really good team in their league, at least. And so I'd like to see them, survive beyond the first round and make some more fun videos.
High Point has gotten some love.
I will say, I was just going to go there, Tim. I very definitely agree with you, Jonah. Very boring region. I picked High Point to get a first round upset over Purdue to kind of spice up that region a little bit and just kind of see a little bit more excitement. High Point's got a lot of love. They won a lot of games. I saw the clip of them on Selection Sunday. It's a big deal that they're going to the tournament. That arena, big arena, was probably like about the size of UB's arena, alumni arena for our locals who aren't sure. It's big, and they sold out the entire arena just to watch the selection show. And when they called out High Point's name, they were just going up for grabs. It was a cool sight to see. It reminds you of what's so special about this tournament, seeing them all rally around. I'm staying away from McNeese, which tells me that McNeese is probably going to win this one. For our loyal friends and listeners will remember last year, I spent, I think, 5 minutes talking about Will Wade's McNeese State team, about how good they were and how they were going to go on to the Elite Eight. And I think they lost their first round game by like 35 points. It was that ugly, that disastrous. So it's like, fool me once, shame on you. You're not going to fool me again. So I'm staying away from that. But it would not shock me if, of course, me picking Clemson, I'm going to turn on my TV, whether it's Thursday or Friday, I don't even know. And I'm going to see McNeese State dancing, and the manager's going to walk out with his boombox playing Kodak Black or something and getting all the he's got like 5 NIL deals already. I mean, like, Jonah, if you were around in this time of day and age, you would have probably had like 10 NIL deals by now.
Yeah, and I would have lost them all because I didn't go to class or, whatever. I will say there is a local connection with High Point. The director of basketball operations, Noah Diebel, is an Akron High School graduate. So there's a little bit of a reason to pick them. And I will say my general bracket advice for anybody and what I try to follow is this. I mean, you can win your bracket and win some money. That really comes down to picking the national champion and having Final Four teams, the way a lot of these things are scored. I would go backwards from there and then pick all of the upsets. Every team that you like, you think might win or has a fun story, because you're going to want that hit of dopamine and that feel good and being able to say, I picked that upset. And if you pick an upset and they don't win, there's really no downside there. The only thing that's wrong is if you pick a team that ends up going to the Final Four, winning it all to lose, and then you don't get those points. But I don't think these brackets are really about winning the money. You can get lucky and be good and do that, but it's really about picking those upsets and being able to say, I got that one, and feeling good about it, and telling your friends you called that upset. And so I say go volume, be a volume shooter, pick a lot of upsets, and you get a couple of them right. And I do multiple brackets. I end up picking pretty much every team to win in at least one of the brackets. So I'm always saying, yeah, pick that one, got that one.
You just inspired me. I think next year what I'm going to do, and maybe if I'm able to run it back for a third time here on the TGAF, if the second one is just
you can go ahead and book it. The Wednesday, we already know when the tournament is next year because they have to plan the arena, right?
It's in Buffalo next year too. Yeah,
Yep.
It's in Buffalo. Yeah, maybe we can do a live show.
I'd like that.
But I will say maybe my strategy next year is I'll just pick 10 upsets, and if 3 of them hit, I'm a Hall of Fame hitter in baseball terms, and it's like there you go.
And with the way the Division II tournament begins slightly before the Division I tournament, think of all the media that will be in town potentially to cover the Division II tournament at Lumsden Gym again.
I like where your head's at. Just don't mention that one to my father, because you will just psych him out and be like, "You got to, oh, we got to get there for." He'll have an uproar if you bring that up to him. Speaking of my family, I will
Maybe
say
we'll be covering
last
it
note
at
on
the
this.
U-Bill.
Last note on this region, Tennessee and Wofford. I'd be remiss if I didn't say my little brother, who, as Jonah knows as wise man Mark MacDonald, for some reason, me and Mark always had this joke, and I joked about this with my friends too. We always joke about how there's always that random like head scratcher, like, like how in the world did they upset them? Mark thinks Wofford is going to be Tennessee, and I was like, you're nuts, like no way. But he's drinking the Wofford Kool-Aid, to use that expression for the second time in this episode. But he's all in, for some reason, all in on Wofford because they have some guy who shoots like the Rick Barry style free throws. And he thinks he's like, Mark's like, I'm telling you, like this kid's going to be the next day. Like, he's going to have all the, remember last year it was like the Jack Golke kid from Oakland hit all the threes against Kentucky and he was getting all the NIL deals. A couple years ago, St. Peter's, they have their head scratching, like, how in the world did they get that upset? The kid Doug Eder with the mustache and everything, he goes viral. Mark has that kid penciled in as the next March Madness superstar. It's always funny because nobody can predict what the, I call it like the WTF, like, loss, like where it's like, how did they lose to them? But, maybe we just jinxed it by talking about it, or I jinxed it. But if Mark MacDonald successfully predicts this and this kid goes on to have a run and make millions of dollars, number one, I think he should become that kid's agent. Number two, I think you should invite my little brother on this show next year. And I think he would usurp me. If Wofford upsets Tennessee, I think I'm going to have to stand down and let little bro hop on the show.
I like any chance to pick against Danny White's team. Although, I mean, I guess if we're talking about local connections, there's another one, former UBAD.
Yeah, there you go.
I know this is a tricky question or tricky for me to get over on a couple of guys who follow college sports so closely, but at the bar, this would be a great trivia question. Where is Wofford?
South Carolina. I don't know where in South Carolina.
Yeah,
but
that's true. Did you know that, Jonah?
No,
Yeah.
I did not.
I had to look it up. That's one of those ones that I have to look up. Every time I see it, I can never commit it to memory.
Where is it in South Carolina? Does it say?
Wofford, South Carolina. Wherever that is.
Yeah.
I barely know where.
No, it's in
Brian
Spartanburg.
Buffalo.
Sorry, it's in Spartanburg.
Oh, that's where Zion Williams is from. Fun fact about Spartanburg. I remember that because that's where he went to high school. Went to Spartanburg something. But they had Wofford had a big time jump shooter, kid by the name of Fletcher McGee, who I really looked up to when I was in high school. Who he broke JJ Redick and Travis Bader's like all time 3-point record for college best. So like when I was in high school watching him, I really admired him. So I watched a lot of like Wofford YouTube basketball highlights and stuff. So I knew it was in South Carolina. I had no idea where it was.
Yeah, Spartanburg, which is the home of I'm looking at their notable people. I'm trying to come up with a fun one. There's not.
Zion.
Yeah, I guess. I was looking for
Zion
something.
Williamson.
I was just looking for something different that wasn't Zion Williamson.
There's no Sabres players from Spartanburg, South Carolina?
No, no. There are some players who probably should be playing for the team in South Carolina in the ECHL, perhaps.
Maybe.
Singing Billy Walker, compiler of shape note tune books, including the Southern Harmony and the musical companion. Wayne Tollison,
Looks like I thought.
former major leaguer.
Yeah. There you go.
All right.
I was gonna say that first guy could be
Flip
the guest
Rosen.
next week.
Flip Rosen.
I don't know who that is.
Baseball player.
No.
Major leaguer. All-star.
If he didn't play for the Yanks, I didn't know him. Or I don't know him.
Well, Nick, thank you for this. And thanks to everybody for listening. Hopefully you gleaned all kinds of knowledge about the local basketball scene on the brackets. We got into pretty much, well, damn near everything when it comes to college hoops in Western New York and for this tournament. Anything to add? Any closing thoughts?
I would say I'm 0 for 1 on my TGAF pick, but I think this is 2 for 2 on a very flowing, nice podcast episode. If you remember last year, I told you I was a rookie in the podcast game, and this is only my second podcast. So right now I'm at about a once a year podcast pace. I think I got to start speeding that up a little bit if I want to grow up to be like you guys one day.
Did you have to get this cleared with Buffalo State Communications?
I did not. I did not.
It's always better to ask for forgiveness than for permission.
Yeah.
It's easier, not better, but it's easier, I should say.
Well,
Nick, thanks for this.
Yeah, it looks like I know who I'm calling when I get off the air.
I think you're all right.
Yeah,
maybe just check in with Mike Birkin, just to double check.
Hey, real spill though, you got for the local fans, you should really just keep your eye on what Birkin. Luckily I was able to be a part of it this year. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll be a part of it next year. Kind of everything in my future is up in the air. But if you're a local basketball fan, I know most people crowd that gym and that sports arena for the high school games, the high school championship games and stuff. But keep your eye on what Coach Birkin is building over there at Buffalo State. He's got a summer camp coming up. He's looking to get kids back in the gym, kids involved with the program, stuff like that. Very similar to what my father's been able to do at Damon. But it's really trending in the upward direction. I was so happy to be a part of it this year. I think it's only a matter of time before that arena is not just selling out and drawing big crowds for high school games. It's drawing big crowds for SUNYAC basketball games, and they're able to, put some numbers on the banners up there and get some more storylines and cool things we can talk about here on the basketball side in West New York.
Mike Birkin used to throw alley-oops to Rob Gronkowski.
Yes, he did.
High school basketball teammates.
High school teammates. Yep.
At Williamsville North.
Maybe we get Gronk to be like our NIL manager or NIL GM, like Woj. Now I'm cooking with some ideas. Now I really got to call.
I think you need attorney Robert Birkin to be your GM.
Yeah. Slip and fall, get Birkin a call. That's Mike Birkin's uncle.
Well, Nick, thanks for this. And good luck to everybody out there in their brackets. Please give us a like, subscribe, throw a note down in the comments. We read them all. And thanks to everybody out there for listening, or if you have the predilection to check us out on YouTube, for you voyeurs out there, thanks for watching us on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants.